Welcome to today's discussion on Stephen King's Carrie. So again, we have two parts to our discussion today. We'll try to keep it a little bit on the short end, but let's kick it off with Carrie. Any particular observations or thoughts about the film?
Coming from a reproductive perspective, I thought it was very interesting that she had menarche in high school. Presumably, I'm guessing around 16 years old. I think it's like an adult playing a child character, but that's a delayed onset of menarche. And I was curious as to the relationship between cognitive changes and psychiatric changes and delayed menarche. And I found a paper describing the relationship between childhood physical abuse and delayed onset of menarche. And there's a dose-dependent response between the severity of childhood physical abuse and onset of menarche. So the worse the abuse is before 11 years old, the later the menarche. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
And when you have a second, can you send me the link to that article?
Yep.
Right. And what's the clinical descriptor for delayed menarche?
Amenorrhea?
Yeah, primary amenorrhea, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Primary. So our main character, Carrie White, has primary amenorrhea. So we've got to begin to think of a differential diagnosis, and certainly as part of that diagnosis, consider a past developmental or psychiatric history consistent with or significant for abuse.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, I know like eating disorders can definitely cause primary amenorrhea.
Eating disorders, okay.
And she probably did have one because of the way her mom kind of was. She was kind of like really religious, so she might have restricted their meals because of maybe poisoning and could go into like a delusional disorder as well for their mom in terms of that. But yeah.
Also from an economic standpoint too, I kind of thought that the mom didn't work and she only got money from like donations.
Mm-hmm.
You get that vibe too.
Yeah, where she saw the Steve's mom.
Mm-hmm. So they just didn't have like the financial backing to have enough food in the house.
Okay. What else? What eating disorder is likely to present with primary amenorrhea?
Anorexia.
Yeah. And what defines anorexia?
BMI under 18.
Fear of gaining weight.
Louder?
Fear of gaining weight.
Right. And then I need one more comment that connects the two, right? It's one full sentence that's in three parts. I got two of the three parts. Fear of gaining weight, despite being underweight, as evidenced by a BMI.
Okay.
So that's the three part, and it's just one easy feature. If you remember that, you'll readily distinguish this condition from the other eating disorders, including bulimia nervosa.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
This might be a stretch for primary amenorrhea, but like pregnancy.
I'd like to see that in secondary amenorrhea, but you're right. It could be pregnancy. Mm-hmm. What counts against that?
That if you're not menstruating, if you haven't reached the point where you're menstruating, you can't get pregnant.
Again, there might be that small window.
Right. Exactly.
But the other thing is that she's very socially inhibited.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't rule that out.
Right.
Any other observations about our main character, Carrie White?
Well, she thinks that in the movie, she has telekinesis. And she is kind of, she thinks she can control things because, it could be because she can't like control things, like aspects of her life. So maybe that's like a hallucination that she thinks she can do. And she also like goes to the library to try to find books, to find others who are just like her, to kind of validate her feelings, what she can do.
Mm-hmm.
She views it as a miracle, which I thought, like, the person that she looked up was, like, miracles that happened. And then through that, she found out that she had telekinesis, which I thought was interesting because it's the religious background that her back up.
And then I also felt like she was, I don't know quite how to explain it, like kind of regressed, like
She got calling her mom like mama. And like especially after everything that happened, she came home like mama. I'm just like
like mommy,
mama. Yeah, like it was just kind of
Oh, my
strange.
mother, mama.
I was thinking that before I said it, but I think it was the scene after like it was a kind of okay, but then after everything went down, she comes home and she's like mama. After what she did, I'm like,
her voice.
yeah. Maybe the combination of that is making me feel like she's like not her age
Like,
or
mama,
something.
please,
So,
mama.
yeah.
I agree. She also dresses like a child. At least in the
Yeah.
beginning of the movie, she was in this like blue doll dress
Yeah, dog.
and like straightening up her cardigan before she even goes and speaks to her mom. It's just sitting on the stairs, and like even in the shower, she's just rocking back and forth, crying like a 3-year-old.
The way that
Forget her.
I also think that's interesting actually go off of that. You can see how her clothing changes as the movie goes on, is how she's also like finding herself. Like she started off in the doll clothes and then she ends up in that dress that's like it's like revealing, yeah. It's not.
It's not,
but like
the
that's what
dirty
it's supposed to
clothes.
be.
Huh?
Wait, so did you guys all watch the remake?
The 1970s one, I thought.
70s.
Okay. I just want to make sure we're all talking about the same movie.
Oh, I'm not.
Yeah.
I'm talking about the newest one, but I guess it's kind of similar.
There's similarities, yeah. Yeah, I think taken together, all that I'm hearing there's some regression. I heard that there's even a voice change, and then aspects of not only telekinesis but pyrokinesis as well. You know, when she is lighting things on fire and things are moving, there's a tendency for a normal audience to focus on the object that just caught fire. Did anybody ever actually pay attention to her? Because during these scenes, and again, 99% of the general public will look at what just caught fire and look at the gym. That's the environment. Did anyone ever look at what's going on with Carrie during that very episode?
Like her hair from her face and her eyes, like
They're always like big.
Yeah.
huge.
What's going on?
She was standing with her she had a very strange expression on her face during the pyrokinetic episode, with like this almost. No one else can see it, but like her head sort of inverted and then her eyes flexed up, pointing upwards.
Right.
And she's completely stationary. She doesn't really move. She sort of rotates occasionally, and that's it.
Exactly right. And what's that called?
That's it.
Catatonia?
Dissociation. I started even simpler. She's dissociated. Yeah, she's dissociated. Now she might be dissociated due to catatonia, but let's keep it simple. She's dissociated. So again, regression. There's a voice change. Dissociated. It's all consistent, right? And yes, the dissociation would account for the voice change that you've also observed, right? This idea that Carrie dissociates or is experiencing dissociative episodes, consistent or inconsistent with eating disorder, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Any trauma or abuse, I feel like it can.
Yeah, is the third variable. Right? Yeah, the comorbidity between dissociative episodes and even dissociative disorders and eating disorders is high. Yeah, it's high. All right, so I think we're this is shaping up. That is the discussion of the film Carrie as a potential fictional case of a dissociative episode, if we rule out dissociative disorder, and that might include anorexia nervosa. Yeah. Other thoughts there?
Paranoia, more so than the delusional, paranoid, she was like, Mom was there, they laughed at me, she was just so, preoccupied with the idea that people are laughing at her and, looking at her. Even when there doesn't seem to be, any tangible reason, I feel like the film was shot from her point of view. In my head, I was like, are these people really laughing at her? Are they genuinely, so I thought that, her paranoia, as well as her mom's just, super up there.
Again, very consistent with emerging literature. Between 70 and 80% of individuals with established dissociative disorder actually will experience delusions at some point in their life. So this doesn't necessarily move us away from Carrie being afflicted with a primary dissociative disorder. With co-occurring anorexia nervosa, this actually supports their working theory, our primary diagnosis.
I also thought that possibly maybe the whole like prom scene didn't actually happen. That maybe she thought this in her head that like finally she can get like the Prince Charming type of guy to talk to her, and that she ends up going to the prom, and this like sort of events happen because it couldn't actually happen. So then maybe the whole laughing scene, the blood scene, it's like she can. Like, she's just thinking about things that she wants to get, but she can't get because everyone's still out to get her.
Interesting.
That never happened.
Which, can I say one thing?
Please.
Because like I had this idea at the end of the movie when I was looking at Tommy. He looks exactly like with the hair that the doll in the prayer one looks like, the Jesus that's in the like with the, it has the long hair and like whatever. And so I was thinking that maybe like when she got put in the closet, maybe it was just like everything was in her brain after that. Also because at the end with Sue. Wait, or the other, she, when she like looked back at it, she wasn't having like haunted thoughts about her friends or about Tommy. It was about Carrie like them dying in the fire at the end, which could have happened. Her mom lit a lot of candles.
Interesting. All right. If this whole movie really then is Carrie just in the closet, dissociating, and then from that point, we actually, as the audience, take the first person perspective, and then everything we see is a product of her mind. That's very almost congruent with what we discussed in Split, which is interesting because in Split, there was also that other theme that individuals with the dissociative disorder are actually gifted. And that's captured here too, because as Carrie is researching her ailment, it might be approached as a gift, right? So there's also a shared theme on that level too. It's interesting that these two films that we've discussed back to back might actually be paired. Any further thoughts about what's going on here?
I thought the mom was also an interesting character. Initially, she almost reminded me of like a witch character. It's like a witchy architecture in how she presented herself in her home, which made me think about schizotypal personality disorder. As the movie went on, I wasn't sure if the severity of her illness, because she has something, exceeded schizotypal personality disorder, if that makes sense.
It's interesting that you actually said that she looks like a witch type of character because she actually calls her daughter a witch, which would be projection.
Yeah, I think she continuously projects onto her daughter throughout the entire movie because, well, what I think about her is that she kind of uses like religion to compensate for her like husband leaving her and the family, but then she also talks about like, I believe it sounded like she talked about like marital rape, and Carrie was also the product of that action or that moment, and now she doesn't want the same thing to happen to her daughter, so she's been projecting all of her feelings or whatever got her to that point or that state in her life. And, like, she doesn't want her to like talk to boys or interact with men because she's afraid that like the same thing's gonna happen to her. And maybe when the husband left them, that everyone was laughing at her, and that's why she keeps telling Carrie like they're gonna laugh at you, they're gonna laugh at you, and interact with these people.
Yeah.
With that is that when she was describing the marital rape, she also was saying that she liked it, and because of that, I also think that when he left and like Carrie, I think that she's almost like you have to stay away from this sin, because like it's like that's when I also took away something like that as well. I don't know. Yeah, that's why I think she got so extreme with the as soon as you bleed, then the men will come, and then she made hers like say that passage like back and forth, which I thought was interesting.
And that very theme, every time she looks at Carrie, she's reminded of her trauma. Is and it's certainly tied to the husband abandoning her. Is also a theme captured in another movie called The Babadook, in which, on the way to the hospital, Amelia is in a car accident where her husband dies and her son is born, same day. So on her son's birthday, she's always reminded of her husband's death. And there's this prevailing thought, I wish you would have died. Right? So, anybody here see the Bop? It just happens to be the movie we're discussing in our master's course on Tuesday.
I had a question. I know, like, we talk about postpartum psychosis all the time. Is there, like, a pregnancy psychosis? Like, cause, like, just the opening scene where she was, like, giving birth by herself, it already seemed like she was already psychotic, so I was just wondering if that's, like...
Not officially.
Okay, just wondering.
My gut says, quite possibly, in further additions, right now the literature just isn't supportive of it as much as it has been supportive of peripartum depression. So there, in 2013, the American Psychiatric Association recognized that about 50% of the cases of postpartum depression actually begins during pregnancy, hence the change in terminology, but they kept postpartum psychosis the same.
Okay.
They didn't touch that one. So.
And then the last character I want to talk about was the girl who did all these bad things to Carrie. She was like either a psychopath or maybe conduct disorder. I'm not sure because of the age or what she was, but she was.
We're not going to give her the benefit of the doubt and say it's quote unquote normal adolescence.
Absolutely not.
Why not?
Very strange.
Yeah, going out your way to get pig's blood and stuff is like,
Let's go murder a pig and
Yeah.
spill it all, like,
Extreme. Just extreme.
Well, you went for the murder of to get the blood. I mean, it's kind of an afterthought because we're all focused on the blood and what she's about to do, but there is cruelty to animals there. Getting to your point. Right?
And
Now,
she was so happy. She was just. It was that was a weird scene. she
And, like,
was so happy to
saved
do.
her life.
Yeah, like she was like stimulated, like excited by it. It was very strange.
okay.
I'll give her one thing for the benefit of doubt. I feel like she was also abused by people. Like her boyfriend kept slapping her
Oh yeah.
for calling him a dum-dum. And I don't know, I felt like there might be some displacement. Like she feels really angry at him and perhaps other people. I don't know what her parents are like. I don't know if she has other boyfriends. And then she just displaces that to Carrie.
Could be. And the idea here would be that off script, she maybe had cathexed or discharged that anger appropriately, and it was thwarted. Right, her boyfriend's bigger than her, and the response may have been such that it wasn't that it's her behavior was not positively reinforced, but otherwise was punished, and therefore she realized she could no longer discharge it appropriately. Hence, the use of displacement.
even when the coach slapped her too, it's like that also coincides with that because the coach is coming from a power of authority and has the control over her, that when she slapped her, she still couldn't like discharge, and she tried to get her friends all to leave with her and no one wanted to because everyone wanted to go to prom. Like I think that was also like her showing that she couldn't displace it properly, so took it, like everything that was bad that was happening to her, she just put it onto Carrie, even though Carrie didn't do anything wrong.
Oh, like also that.
She literally just breathed. The problem.
Well, Carrie also gave her permission in terms of nonverbal, right? I mean, she's underweight, she's shy. I mean, those characteristics are what the bully is looking for. Basically, it's the anti-boyfriend, the anti-coach. This is not a person of authority. If anything, it's someone who appears to be submissive non-verbally. So I'm using the word permission in a very psychological way, not in any real way here, right?
And since you said submission, I felt like Carrie also had she was extremely submissive because at the point where she turned on her mom and she was like, I'm doing this no matter what. In the back of my head, I'm just like, well, if you had all this power, like kind of like how did this dynamic end up where it kind of was? Where it seems like she's scared of her mom even though she has the power, like technically in her head. So I was like, yeah, she must just be, I don't know what she was scared of really of her mom. She could lock her in the closet. Like, I don't know, I was thinking, like, maybe, was she locking her mom in the closet this whole time? And then we just happened to see the one time where her mom really, I don't know, I was just confused by that whole document.
Yeah, man, I think it's part of adolescent development. You go from someone who's completely dependent, realizing that you're becoming your own person, and there's always that give and take, the test of the parent. Of course, Stephen King puts this on a much larger stage, brings in the supernatural, and the way Carrie will test her mom is through telekinesis and pyrokinesis, not coming in late or doing the things that we would think would be part of normal development. But I think that's the reason why. It's because any adolescent usually goes in a stepwise approach to test parents, right? Test those boundaries, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. Even though she has this ultimate power, she's going to test it, and unfortunately, it derails, right?
Yeah.
It does just uncork at the end. All right, with that, let's segue over and discuss our Disney film of the day. All right, so now the discussion is going to focus on The Case of Cinderella. So another prom or ball guy. So,
I guess drawing comparisons, both Carrie and Cinderella were both like suffered some sort of abuse.
mhm.
But I guess the way they went about it was different.
At least we think. At least at first glance.
I thought there was another dissociation opportunity or opportunity for identifying dissociation in Fairy Godmother scene. Whether somebody, the reality could have been that, a kind neighbor helped her, or the reality could have been that she dissociated the whole episode and she never went to the ball and none of the last half of the movie or third of the movie or whatever it was ever happened.
Potential. Of course, the alternative is that this is a movie in which different objects can be actually transformed into coach and horses, which, if that were the report for a patient, and you came back around this table and presented as such, I'm not so sure I'd believe you. Right, so it's more of the medical slant on how to interpret what's really going on, and if you're focused on that particular scene in which she's first introduced to the fairy godmother, visited by the fairy godmother, that might be the scene in which we have to focus on. It's potential. I think that's fair.
Or the idea of being falling in love with a savior. The girlfriend was like, oh, when you saved her in class, you saw the way she kind of looked at you, and maybe in Carrie's mind, she just stepping back, I don't know what it'd be called, but just blowing up that idea and turning it into a real tangible love sort of thing. All he did was speak up in class a little bit, and now she's she's did you see the way she looked at you? And maybe in Carrie's mind, she's oh, that's the only one who ever stood up for me. So now she's her feelings are much deeper than maybe it's a histrionic type of, I'm not sure what to call it, but yeah.
Is it Carrie or Cinderella?
Well, both.
Sure.
Yeah, I started with Carrie, but it applies for Cinderella too, the prince being able to save her from such a horrible situation. So just makes the love story so much more amplified because she's in such a bad situation and no one else but this one person kind of looks out for her in a way.
And Carrie's fairy godmother would be the teacher.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's also interesting that their levels of defiance is for Cinderella, it's when she came out of the room to try on the slipper and actually go into the ball was a level of defiance, but I think the one at the end that she was really showing her stepmother that she can't control her anymore and she's gonna try on that slipper and have her happy ever after. And at the same time with Carrie, it's in the kitchen. And she's the level of defiance is when she started throwing the knives at the mom. And that was interesting too, is kind of taking back the power.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the savior idea that Emma mentioned, there's one thing that I actually wrote down the timestamp for it. It's at 53:54 on Amazon Prime. There's a picture of Jesus in the reflecting in the broken mirror when she's putting on her makeup, I think. And then there's a picture of, what was the guy's name, Tommy, in the newspaper pasted next to the mirror on the wall. And I thought that there was a parallel symbolism between Savior 1 and Savior 2, the old Savior in the rearview mirror, in the broken rearview mirror, and the new Savior that she's identified in this young man.
Interesting. All right. Couple of thoughts here. One of the things I think about Cinderella, which I'm not so sure is captured in Carrie, and it might have to do with the timing, and if that's the teaching point, that's wonderful. And that is, given the perceptual disturbances that are experienced by Cinderella being around midnight and really focused on midnight, I'm wondering if there's the loss of the visual cue that further potentiates or otherwise perpetuates whatever is going on. So if you're looking at some aspect of psychosis, with this story, the Cinderella myth, really focusing on midnight, does this hallmark delirium to the extent that there does seem to be some role that time plays in Cinderella's story. And does that help us differentiate delirium from psychosis? Because that's not an easy differentiation to make in clinical practice.
So are you saying she might be sundowning?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now she's young, so there's probably other stuff going on. But then again, what else do we know about Cinderella? I mean, she's abused in terms of doing the housework, but focus on her name too. I mean, she's a chimney sweeper. So is there an element of hypoxemia that would make her otherwise susceptible? Cinderella.
She's often okay.
That's the source material. That's the work that Disney based their movie on. Yeah. I mean, forget.
Like cinder blocks, like in the chimney. Yeah.
Isn't she called Cinder Slut?
Cinder, and then Ella was this beautiful.
I did not know that.
Yeah.
And she also lives among like animals, kind of in squalor. I mean, there's sort of a rosier painting of it in the movie, but
Oh yeah.
she's probably malnourished as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
In terms of what she consumes. I don't know if we ever saw her eat in the movie. But
Like,
the
something
other
like Carrie.
sisters certainly did.
Yeah, neither of
Yeah. Carrie's not eating because she may have anorexia. I mean, and Cinderella's not eating because of abuse. Both are malnourished. How do you differentiate delirium from psychosis? I mean, you walk into a room and a patient is not bound in reality. I think on CL, we kind of bias you to think delirium. What else might be part of that workup? Or at least in terms of the evaluation?
Is it all just the metabolic stuff to make sure everything is normal? Then it's probably not delirium, it might be psychosis, or if it's for an extended period of time.
Yeah, I think that's a part of it. Again, and that's the bias of being in a med-surg hospital, and that is if there's an underlying cause. And we have, even as psychiatrists, that's the way we have to think, right? It's always due to an underlying cause until proven otherwise. That is organic cause until proven otherwise. Hence why the lab workup of delirium. But the other part, again, remembering delirium, there are cognitive deficits, and there's got to be two, right? And while one of those could be perceptions, therefore overlapping with psychosis, the other one has to come from either level of consciousness, which does differentiate from psychosis. And then the other one would be memory/concentration, right? So the idea here, by definition, delirium, think the 3 C's. First C, cognitive deficits. More specifically, 2, with one of those being required to either be concentration/attention or level of consciousness. And the other could be from any cognitive domain, including perceptual disturbances. The second C is the course, acute and onset and fluctuating. That is not the way psychosis works. Now, if psychosis is substance-induced, sure. But usually mental disorders within the schizophrenia spectrum do not have a rapid onset. Sometimes brief psychotic disorder can present that way, but otherwise, these are usually chronic illnesses. And the final C is the cause, right, which, as we stated, is due to the effects of a substance or an underlying medical condition, which is not the case for mental disorders in that schizophrenia spectrum or other psychotic disorders chapter of the DSM. But again, could be substance-induced psychotic disorder. All right, so sensorial level of consciousness is really very, very helpful. So I think while there's that loss of visual cue without sundowning, I don't know if we know enough to think that her level of consciousness is helpful here. At least Disney didn't tease that out. Nor should they. So in this way, I think Carrie is a very nice kind of alternative reimagined Cinderella.
I guess I just wanted to bring up, I mean, in my opinion, the best scene in the movie is H.I. like associated with some of these feelings, like, or like the aggression, or like I feel like she like actually wants to harm these people. So I was just wondering about that aggressive and violent side type of thing.
Not necessarily, not necessarily part of dissociative disorder per se, but certainly there could be parts of one's history. Remember, and even in Split we discussed this, there's that wish fulfillment, there's that fantasy. I wish we were abducted.
Oh.
And I wish that my trauma and my baggage ends up being my gift, where those that are pure and otherwise never traumatized, they fail, but I will triumph and they'll rely on me. I wish that happened. I wish that fantasy. So not necessarily HI as part of the illness per se, but certainly the individual could bring in that fantasy of what may happen to them. And I think that resonates here with Carrie too. She's being bullied, and she has this wish fantasy. I want revenge. I wish I could get them all back. Now, that usually is just harbored in the id, and with the developed superego, those impulses may not even come to conscious awareness. But that's not the way Stephen King wrote this.
Yeah,
right? And I think that it's interesting because I think Stephen King, and I have seen articles on this, and I've definitely heard him interviewed about this. He painted that mother in the way that he did for a big reason here. She is an overwhelming superego. She's a very intrusive mom. And I think the fact that Carrie doesn't have the ego strength to allow that superego and that id to interact in some kind of adaptive way is intended here. And that's the role of the mom here. If mom had not been that overbearing, maybe Carrie's superego would have been like yours or mine. And maybe then her ego strength would have been such where she wouldn't be able to tolerate those impulses, those things that come to conscious awareness about, I really wish this would happen, and realize that's just a fantasy of mine. I mean, it's, I'm gonna be able to deal with those feelings, not Carrie. And that's largely attributed to the mom. All right, we're going to call it there at the bottom of the hour. Any final thoughts on either of these films?
I've just been thinking about how Tommy is the only person besides Sue experience. Even at the end, he gets hit on the head by the bucket, and that's what we assume kills him. So it's kind of interesting to see that even if it is a fantasy, he's safe from her desires to hurt people.
Interesting, yeah. Again, her Prince Charming.
Sue was kind of an interesting character. That she seems, a lot of the secondary characters are pretty interesting in both of these movies. Sue, you see her in the bed at the end, and I couldn't help but wondering if Barry represented some, like, Sue's id in some kind of a dysphoric episode, but again, like, similar to what you're saying in terms of, like, not fleshed out enough, I don't think that there's enough content there to make an argument one way or the other, because we don't know what's happened to Sue, although we do see Sue's mother. We don't see any other mothers. And we know that Sue's mother says to somebody who's doing door-to-door proselytization, I'll drink to that, which is a little unusual, and is holding a drink in her hand. So there may be allusions to alcoholism in the mother as well.
And her want to save Carrie, like she felt way worse than like anybody else in the group, even though she really didn't do anything. Like her guilt was like, I don't know why she felt that need to feel. I mean, obviously they did something bad, but she like missed prom. She like donated her boyfriend, like so. But she felt like an immense amount of guilt for practically. I mean, I don't see why, in my opinion. And the people or the person who should have felt guilt was like, "Girl, I'm doubling down." So
Maybe Carrie felt like Sue was supposed to be her friend, and so maybe she went over to like the popular side and left her, and now she believes that Sue is trying to like repay, or she feels guilty, so she's trying to like, what's the word? Repay that to Carrie in some way. So she's like, oh, you can use my boyfriend for like this time being since you like him, or like you can have this and XYZ. And so like since everything still went bad in the end, now Sue's supposed to spend the rest of her life feeling guilty that she's I guess dead or being like haunted by her dad.
Yeah, I think one of the things, I mean, if Sue were to present to therapy, I think one of the things that captures everything that you just described was the idea that she knows that abuse is going on in the home and how she's trying to struggle with it. And it just changes who a person is when your best friend is enduring that type of trauma over time. If we don't know, remember, dad here is the pertinent negative, right? We think of history taking with pertinent positives and pertinent negatives. Well, movie viewing is the same. Again, a normal person would watch this movie and not give a second thought about the dad, because it seems like Mrs. White clarifies why he's not in the picture, but I'm not so sure that's true. Right? There's a reason why Stephen King leaves him out, and I think the fact that he's missing is very, very telling, because I'm hearing that it's a history of abuse, and I'm hearing that even in the literature, what we think is going on with Carrie may be a product of that abuse, right? And the fact that Stephen King writes the father, out of the script is very supportive of the idea that the abuse probably started with him, right? And that means that Sue probably knows that, right? Now we watched in Fiddler, we watched the movie Forrest Gump yesterday, and even though Forrest, I think, is depicted as having ASD with intellectual deficit disorder, at least borderline intellectual functioning as per the movie script. There's more going on with this character because of his relationship with Jenny. I mean, he knows what's happening in that house over time, and in his lifetime, he endures everything that Jenny experiences because he so much wants to be with the only girl he's ever loved, but she can't because of that. And that's the story of Forrest Gump too. So there's a nice relationship in parallel with that as well. Although I missed you guys at the East Lecture Hall last night, I get to say hello to you guys. All right, we'll leave it there. Friday the 13th, next Friday. All right, that will be our film discussion. All right, thank you.